Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go over just a little bit of review of the assignments themselves. Obviously, you can read through all of this to get a really clear and descriptive indication of each section of what you'll be doing. But the brainstorming assignment. So this is the first step in the process of actually designing a level and constructing a level. And the reason why we're going through this process is because we're emulating exactly what has been done in the industry. This project and this series of assignments and classes has been built by the industry professionals that know the process and workflow that go from level design concept to creation all the way through implementation and full polish. So this is why you can't just come into this class and say, all right, here's Unity, let's build a level, and we'll just go forward with no plan. We want to design everything out as thoroughly as possible before we even get into 3D at all. So we'll be starting out with the brainstorming assignment, and then from there we'll be refining our ideas further into the LDD. From the LDD, we'll take our LDD and our design of our level and turn it into a flowchart. That flowchart is solely to be focused on your mechanics, and we'll go over that even further next week. But it's similar to what you've done in GD1 when you're using flowcharts, but it's a little different because it's more about how your level is going to flow from area to area. And then from that, you'll take that process and build your actual 2D map, a top-down version of your representation of what you want to actually build in Unity. Then that map you'll take into the level design and actually build it in Unity, and then from there you'll take that level and bring it into Des 3 and really carry it on and polish it the whole way through. But the starting point is the brainstorming. And if anybody still has this notion in their head that once they graduate and they can get a job just coming up with ideas and being creative, you should know by now that that doesn't exist, right? You got to be the top dog at the company or own the company, right? Have lots of money, be a senior to really be able to just come up with ideas and have other people implement them for you. You're going to have to be doing the work yourselves. So keep that in mind when you're doing the brainstorming and coming up with ideas. But this assignment itself, this is when you get to be that idea guy, right? You're going to have to come up with 100 different setups and 100 different ideas for your level, and you want them to be quick and fast. So I've heard in the past some students tell me, man, this took me 8 hours, this took me 10 hours to complete. And it may take you, an hour or two in lab or 3 hours or so, I would feel is realistic. But these should be quick and fast, right? Just get your ideas down, get a whole bunch down, and then refine them and go through them and find the ones that are actually something you want to build and feasible for your level. So when I said the word setup, does anybody have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say setup? No. What about mechanic? Do you guys know what a mechanic is in a level or in a game? Yes? Can someone give me an example of a mechanic? Jumping? Okay. Definitely. That's a very base. So if we're talking about Mario, jumping is a mechanic that is used in Mario. So a setup is how that mechanic is used in the level, right? So the bricks that Mario can break, right? Having a brick that Mario jumps and hits one and gets a coin, that's a setup, right? It's an interaction for the player, something the player is doing. And that's what we care about in design, right? We care about the interactions in the player experience. So for scraps, I'll give you one that's super low-hanging fruit, and then I hope no one uses this in their level. You can if you really want to. It's just been done 1,000 times, but the most basic setup I could think of using the grab null would be the player uses a box to, the player moves a box into place to jump over a fence or to get over a larger obstacle, right? Just with the setups, you want to think about actions, right? And you should be able to read that sentence back to yourself and visualize in your head what the player is actually doing, or what would the player be doing in that scenario. So minor setups, smaller little actions are going to be used in your level to keep the player engaged, to keep them active. Like I was just saying, moving something in place to jump over an obstacle, even just jumping over something or crouching underneath something, sliding something out of the way. Using those tools provided in those mechanics are what you're going to be actually implementing. So jumping is definitely a base type of mechanic. Another mechanic itself would be like pressure plates, right? In the creative vision, and I'll go ahead and pull that up. think it's in the LDD. It says you should read this. Creative Vision. So down in the Creative Vision, there is a list of acceptable mechanics. Note that these are not the only things you can choose from. We encourage you to come up with your own, really push yourselves to innovate. But these are some examples of mechanics themselves. So now with the mechanics, you want to think about the setups, right? Really, what are the ways I can use those in my level? So does anyone have any examples of a way you could use a pressure plate as a setup? What you got?
Very stupid one. Step on pressure plate, open door.
Okay, so you step on the pressure plate and the door opens. So now does the door stay open when you get off of it?
No.
It closes. Okay, so you have to move something onto the pressure plate to open it, right? So pushing that even further, or we're going to talk about IPM, where we're going to introduce mechanics, right, and then allow the player to practice them somewhere in between, and then we really want to let them master that. Give them something challenging now that they know the mechanics and how they work with each other. Give them something to push themselves. So it could be something as if you have colored pressure plates, right? I have red, yellow, and blue. And now if I find certain items or put items on the red and the yellow pressure plates, right, an orange door will open, or an orange collectible is accessible, right? Things like that. And now you can have that build-up where you have a simple one where it's just introducing the player to this concept. And now as they progress, there's more to it, or there's more mechanics layered on top of them. So take a look at this list and review it. Some of these are very common that we see, and these are going to be things you're going to be implementing, right? So you can look in the project template what's been given to you. Most of it's the character and the inventory system, the grab null, a lot of those base mechanics, the controls for the character. But everything else you're going to be building and implementing yourself. So you'll be given time and learn how to do so in level design. But these are some of the things that have been done before and within the realms of possibility for what you know ahead of time. And feel free to start to prototype some of these yourselves inside Unity. Like, can you make a pressure plate, right? Can you make a trigger volume that the player walks up to it and something happens? If not, we're actually going to be learning a lot and talking about trigger volumes this month, so you'll get some understanding. But Google and the Unity docs are always a great starting point for you to learn anything that you want to do inside of Unity. So going back to the brainstorming, you'll be doing, here's the different sections you'll be coming up with, right? So bad storming, these are just anything goes, right? So in the creative vision, we have certain things we don't want you doing. So we definitely don't want, AI, drivable vehicles, magic, mutants, things that aren't within the creative vision of scraps, right, which is post-apocalyptic, this kind of like, I always visioned it like a Borderlands kind of feel, and kind of goofy and wacky, but also has this kind of technology built into it with this post-apocalyptic feeling. So we really want to stick with that. But for the bad storming, anything goes. So if you have some really crazy idea or something elaborate that you want to just have your ideas on paper, put those in the bad storming sections. Because then as you go forward, jumping down to the freeform list, what you can do is take a bad storming idea or take something that's not quite within the scope of what we have time for and rework it and make it something that is freeform. That is something you want to actually build. So the freeform itself is just your best ideas or something you really think is going to be workable and feasible within this time frame and within the creative vision. The random association list, if you go down to that section, you can use this random word generator site, or there's others like it, to just generate a word, and then you just start to make a relationship with something from the creative vision and tie it to an actual setup itself. So there's some examples right down here that you can read through and really start to just get creative with this. This whole assignment is just different ways to come up with different ideas. And the ILA for today is the John Cleese discussion. And we'll either have time to do one of two. Hopefully by the end we can either watch the video or we can do a short little brainstorming activity together at the end of this class. But if not, you'll be able to watch this. It's only about a half hour long if we don't get to it in lecture. Really good and good delivery and really funny jokes layered in there and really good ways to push yourselves creatively and force. Really the whole thing is that creativity can be forced is what his overall point is that he gets to. So really good stuff. We should be able to get to it today in lecture. I'm hoping to actually watch the video. So the free form list, yep, this is where really anything goes. Really just want again, think yourselves within scope. And today, between 11 and 1, and for the online students, I can provide you guys some example videos and things, but they'll be doing some example videos from 11 to 1 in lecture. So if you guys want to stay in the PNP 3 lecture, so if you guys want to stay around a little bit or just come back early from lunch and just check those out, the more that you understand and see that foresight, the better it's going to help you. So the incremental step list, what you'll be doing here is starting with one setup, right? We're starting with a setup here. So the player must interact with the mobile solar panel and position it so the panel is moving towards the sun. This then powers a building door, allowing the player access. So then what you want to do from here is you want to change one word or phrase in that sentence and then underline it, right? So here we changed, rather than pointing it towards the sun, we're going to point it towards a laser. Then that powers on a door, right? And then from there, we change that to, instead of it powering on a door, it powers a force field that protects the scrapper, right? So it turns something on. So by the end of this, once you have your list of 20, you'll have 20 completely different setups from each other, all by just changing a key word or phrase. And if you find any one of these ways that is working for you, that you're actually like, wow, I'm coming up with good stuff, keep doing it. You don't have to just do 20 of these, right? If you want to do a whole nother list of 20 for your own sake to come up with more setups, go for that. I've usually found a lot of the creative ones that we've done in class with an example of one of these. The incremental step, you usually get a wide variety of different things, and they're all also different from each other. And now the reductive list, you definitely want to do this section last. Now you want to just go through your entire list. So you should have generated 80 ideas by this point, or a variety of 80 unique ones. Then you want to take 20 of those best ones and then refine them even further. So you can elaborate on them, improve them even more, really push yourselves. And your reductive best 20, those are going to be the ones you should be carrying with you to the LDD. All right? So then once you're done with this assignment, you can use this document right here to submit it to Perforce, and this is a very straightforward, so if you know how to create a shortcut, you probably don't even need to look at this, but all I'm doing here is just showing you how to make a shortcut, and all you want to do is here where it says type the location of this item, copy and paste your link. So once you do the get shareable link, so basically when you have your document, you can hit share, and then you can let's see, I don't want to screw up the permissions. Yeah, so you can hit that and then you'll get that link right there. But what you guys want to do is make sure it's set to share and anyone with the link can view. So I'll go ahead and make a new one just so you guys can see that process. So here's my new document. So right now it's set to private. So a really good way to test this is you can open up a new incognito tab. Now if I paste this in here, it should tell me that it's private. Yeah, it's telling me I need to sign in. So what you want to do is when you hit share, you hit this get shareable link. So right when you hit get shareable link, now it's set to on. So it's here, you'll see anyone with the link can view. Make sure this is set on, because if you turn it in and this isn't set, I can't actually view the document. Or others, if you want to say, turn to one of your buddies when you turn in your LDD and ask for just some advice, right, or a critique. If he tries to open it up, and a good way to test is have someone test it before the due date. Make sure it's set to can view, and then you just want to copy this link and you'll paste it right in the shortcut window itself, right? And then here you'll name it your last name, first name, and now this you just submit to Perforce, right? So there's that process for you right there. But same process, just mark it for add and submit that link. Any questions at all about the brainstorming itself? No? Pretty straightforward. Alrighty, so the LDD. So once you're done with the brainstorming itself, you want to start to refine that into the LDD. So we've read the creative vision. Here's a really good chapter from this book about level design. So definitely worth reading and taking in this information, and just bookmark this somewhere and know that you have access to this. Really good stuff. I've read through this. Really good information about how to actually design a level and what to set yourself up for. The common mistakes, this is a document made by Mr. Gasaway and myself of just common things we see in levels and things you want to avoid. Some of it has to do with Unity, some of it has to do with actually making a map, but good things to start to think about. Because overall, the type of game that we want to be building for Scraps is a linear type gameplay where, as a student, you guys want to be building your information and your work to showcase to get a job, right? So it could be an actual lead designer playing through this. It could be some lady in HR that has resumes and these builds to play through. So you want to showcase your best work. You really don't want to have long branching paths or big open worlds that are confusing to players and they get lost. You want to have dense, robust gameplay that gives the players a lot to do in a short amount of time. So big empty areas, this is a really good two example images. And yes, there's plenty of games that do these games well, right? Like Assassin's Creed, GTA, Skyrim, all those games, big open world. You tend to just do a lot of walking. I think it was CSGO. I was watching a streamer play CSGO, and I'm like, man, this game would not have made a good level in Scraps because it's just big open fields where it's long ranges for sniping and things like that. Seems very awesome, but what we want to focus on as students, as individuals, or as teams of 3 or 4 is dense gameplay, because those games that are being made are big budgets, are a lot of money, right? Big companies, a lot of people on those jobs, and they have a long time. They have a year or 2 years, sometimes even more, to actually develop those games. So what we want to be focusing on instead is, wait for it, looks like the internet's crapping out. Is something more like this. So this was a really great example of a student that came to us or turned in his alpha, and it was just this boring hallway that was just, you go forward, you turn left, and you pushed a button and opened up a doorway, and that was it. None of this was here. And that was his alpha. That was his entire level. He didn't get a very good grade. But we basically told him that you need to put something here for the player to do. This is going back to the setups that we were talking about. There needs to be interactions for the player. A really good way to test when you play the example level and when you're testing others' work, or when you're testing the Des 3 teams levels in the upcoming weeks, is see how often you're able to just push W and move the mouse back and forth. If that's what the player can do, there's no gameplay there, right? I'm just moving through space, not doing anything. But if I'm jumping or even pushing A and D for reasons, or using the grav null, right, clicking on the mouse, putting some other crouching, rotating object with the grav null, I'm interacting. I'm doing something other than just pushing W and moving forward. So this student came back, and we didn't tell him, put the fire here, put this little barricade here, now the player jumps. We just told him there needs to be something here. And that's what we're going to be doing throughout this month as we're critiquing each other, is giving you advice and giving you suggestions, and what you do with those critiques and suggestions is up to you as the designer. So he came back with this, and night and day difference, where now the player couldn't get over this barricade. They had to climb up a ladder, jump over here, and now there's a gap. They could jump up here and get a collectible, but then you drop down and had to deal with this fire. You get around here, and there was like a tripwire and some more collectibles and goodies over here. So there's a lot more density, right? In just this one shot, you can see multiple setups, a lot of interaction for the player. As to up here, you're going to be walking for a while to get to your next objective. So as you're coming up with your seconds, we definitely, as your setups, you definitely want to keep in mind this 10-second rule. and that's going to come more into play as you move forward into actually building the map, but still things you want to be thinking about. So this document has a lot of good information, so feel free to bookmark this one as well and just refer back to this. We'll definitely talk about it more when we actually go over making the map, as well as when we critique some of the maps. You'll be referring to some of these as well. Another one I definitely want to point out is this literal key and lock setups. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why can't I have the player go collect a key? All these games do it. And that's exactly why. It's because all the games do it, right? So this is game design where you get to create something different or unique, right? Something other than just the player goes and finds the key, the blue key, and goes to the blue door. Like, yes, I'm sure you can make that work in Unity. Yes, it might be something that you might enjoy playing, but you want to be innovating and creating something better than that, right? So even switching out the literal sense of it, right? We want to be focusing more on a metaphorical key and lock. A great example of this is just a dynamite, right, or a big explosion. The player has to go find the dynamite, and there's a pile of debris or rubble or a blocked door. The player uses the dynamite and throws it at the door, and a big explosion. You have a cool particle effect. You have some sound that goes with it. So the dust settles, and now the player can go through. Same exact thing, right? The dynamite is the key. The barricade was the lock sense, was the door that was locked. So you think about things like that as well. And also other things that you really don't want to stay away from, keys, key cards, and probably the next thing your mind is going to is a crowbar. A lot of students think, oh, pick up the crowbar. Now the player can open doors. That's the same thing as a key. So really push yourselves further, and changing the name of it and actually building some narrative into it, or building some story of what's going on with this. This is where it matters and comes into it. So you may have heard before, and you may hear this moving on in the future. I know Final Project is a big advocate of this, where theme and story and all that doesn't matter. But to a sense, that is part of the player's experience, right? So you can give these players small little pieces of information that are actually enjoyable, and the player can build the story in their background or in the back of their mind. So another one definitely want to pay attention to, I'll come back to it though, is the unworthy featured asset. You'll definitely want to read that before doing the LDD. But this document overall is really good stuff, and I'll be referring to it throughout the month. Question?
Just curious, what is Dark Souls?
So I'll go over this now, but really good analogy here is we don't want to be killing the player repetitively over and over again. So the best analogy that I've learned, this is straight from Mr. Gazaway, is have you guys seen Austin Powers? The first Austin Powers? So when Dr. Evil finally catches Austin Powers and he wants to set him up in the sharks with the lasers and the traps and make him, think he's about to get killed or kill him in a very exciting and dangerous way. And then Scott Evil comes in and goes, Dad, what are you doing? Why don't you just shoot him in the head? Right? That's what players, that's what a lot of students want to do from Dark Souls. They just want to be Scott Evil, where they're just going to kill the player, right? Just shoot him. Why are you going to do all this elaborate stuff? You could just kill him right now. But Dr. Evil is like, well, what do you mean? Why wouldn't I do this awesome stuff? So as a game designer, and you guys have been tricked your whole lives when you're playing games, is that the designers know you're going to beat the level. They eventually know you're going to get through it, but they give you this sense of emotion and connection. Like, they know you're going to save the princess at the end, but by the time you do it, you feel so epic because you just finally got away. Just like with Austin Powers, right? He avoids the sharks, he gets away, just barely slips away, and he feels successful and accomplished. That's the same feeling you want to give to players. So when you're going towards the Dark Souls route, where you're just killing people over and over again, or you're having a pit that only you can solve, it's like you have to make this perfect jump, or just precisely get something in there that's frustrating. It makes it not enjoyable to a wider audience. And again, think about that lady in HR that might be playing your game. So stay away from that and really give the players an emotional roller coaster in their experience, right? Make them feel like challenged, then also make them feel accomplished when they complete your goals.
All right. Have like trial and error without death?
Definitely.
So like you have timing on
Definitely, yeah, and a lot of ways to do it. So another one in there in the creative vision or in the is instant kills. You want to stay away from that as well. One way to do it is, so say example a pit, and we see this. Normally you just have like your platforms, and down in here there'd be a pit where if you fall in this, there's fire or something in here that kills the player, right? But instead you could do something like this. Let me do it backwards. No, I didn't. Just every month. So you have something like this, so where maybe there's a platform right here. And now the player has to jump and make it to here. But if they miss this jump, rather than kill them, they can just walk back up and jump again. So something that can, little design changes like that, where same exact system, but how you design it, you can avoid actually killing the player. And that's a very common thing is you don't need, I had one student last month, he had a really amazing level, it was very well designed. He goes, there's no really way the player can die. Is that a problem? I goes, no, that's fine. Like, Scraps is more of everyone played the Telltale Lego games? Yeah, I mean, yeah, in a way, there is. I mean, it's targeted for a younger audience, right? It's targeted for 8 to 12-year-olds, and I've played a lot with my younger cousins, and they're not the best at it, but they still enjoy it and they can accomplish it, right? So it's not geared for our generation or older, but it's still, that's the type of gameplay you want to be thinking about, finding certain items, connecting them together to progress. And you can layer on more death and actual respawning of the character if you'd want to. Question in the back? Let's take a look. Okay, so that's definitely, this is more important to actually building your actual world inside of Unity and just things to think about, but moving little pieces in your level to grab the player's attention and not make it just feel still, right? So little lights flickering, right, or little pieces of moving particles. So this document is definitely a mixture of concept and actual design things, and we're actually working on splitting it apart a bit, but still a good document that you'll have from pretty much now all the way to Des 3 to refer back to. All right, so back to the LDD, we got the common mistakes. So the IPM chart, I'll take a look at this guy. So what this is, this was an example from a final project team. And what IPM refers to, and yes, this says IMP, this is not correct, it's an IMP chart. They made a great chart here, but just named it wrong. But what this is representing is the mechanics in their game. And across at the top here is the number of levels. So this game was a side-scrolling platformer type game where you could make clones of yourself. So you had the derp clone, the boom clone, and the poof clone. And then below here, these are basically the mechanics that worked with the derp clone. So this guy basically just stood there and didn't really do much, just stood idle. So you could put him on a pressure plate or activate levers. There was these springboards where you could bounce up on, so you could spawn one there and he would bounce and like hit his head on the wall, on the ceiling, and there was different interactions with that. So then like the boom clone, you could basically he would explode. You'd set him down, and then after 3 seconds he'd explode. So you can almost use him to like grenade jump or something like that. It would be similar to like in Halo or a game like that where you could use that to push yourself. And then the poof clone is almost like a teleport. But what this is describing is across the levels when the player is actually being introduced and when they're able to practice that mechanic and then also master that. So you want to be thinking about that in your level and when you're building your mechanic, because you don't want to be, exposing the player to, like, going back to that pressure plate example. Here's 4 pressure plates, and now you got to figure out the right symbols, the right combination to get in when you have never seen this before. You want to be easing the player into that and introduce it to them, allow them to practice, and then master that. So if you were working on this, say we wanted to actually, say I wanted to work on level, level 7 in the game or level 8, one of these, you would read this vertically, right? So if I was working on level 7, I need to make sure the player is mastering moving and jumping. By this point, they've mastered that. Now they're beginning to master interacting with the environment and the derp clone. At the same time, they've mastered all these mechanics down to this point, and now we're also on level 7. We have to make sure we're introducing the moving platform to the player. So that is how you would design your level with that in mind. You've mastered all this, now you're introducing that. Same thing would go if you're working on, a previous level. You have to practice this. Here we're introducing interact. Practice the derp clone, now introduce the lever and springboard. So that is how you would actually build this, and this is a very common thing that's used in the industry. In the IPM chart that name is something that came from a few of our instructors in Final Project, that they really liked that model and they saw it being used more widely throughout. Those words could be interchanged with something, but IPM refers to introduce, practice, and master. So we'll see that again on the actual LDD. So you can read through this, make sure you're following these instructions, but let's take a look at the template link. And now to make a copy of any of these documents, because you can't, some people will come to me and say I can't actually edit the template. That's because if it was the case, then everyone would be editing the same thing. So the first thing you want to do is go File, Make a Copy. And then you just name this what yours is. Last name, first name, name of the assignment. And now you have yours to edit. Right now I can actually edit this. So you'll see here at the top that these brackets, pretty much this is the gray text that you're going to be deleting and replacing with your own text. So everything that you see the brackets you want to replace with the naming of whatever it says. So all this stuff you can fill out, and this is where the meat and potatoes start, is the player goal and the featured asset. So the player goal. Why this is important is, again, is because we are game design. We are trying to innovate and come up with interesting interactions and leave the player with an awesome, memorable experience. So what you want this to be is something that you would want to go and tell some of your friends about, that this awesome interaction that you had. So I would want to, call up one of my buddies and tell them what this cool thing it was I did, this cool thing I did in the game. So if you write in here, just, make it to the end of the area. That's not a very compelling, descriptive, and interactive experience, right? Or something that the player is going to be memorable. You want to be giving something descriptive that is exciting and enjoyable to do, as well as explaining how they're going to be accomplishing that. So getting the, collect the medicine or find the fill in the blank item, whatever item it is your goal, that's not enough. You want to be explaining a little bit more to why they're there, what they're doing themselves, and how they're going to be accomplishing that goal. Really make it something interactive and memorable, not just, get through the maze or make it to the end. By nature, the player is going to make it to the end of your area. That's going to happen. But what are they doing along the way? What is the thing that's going to be exciting to them? Alrighty, the featured asset. So this is not exactly what you're probably thinking off the top of your head, where you may be thinking more of an artistic standpoint, where it's like a visual landmark or some nice object that's present in your world. That's going to be in your level regardless, and good visual landmarks are definitely good things to use. But instead, what you want to be thinking about is, let me go to this section here. So on the common mistakes, we have the unworthy featured asset. So yeah, down here, so importing a huge sign, buildings, vehicles, etc., those are, as from just an asset standpoint, right, as something featured in your level, that makes sense. But what we want is something instead, is something interactive and memorable to the player. Same thing goes for the actual player goal. So here is an example a past student had provided. This is a microscope. So not the biggest and flashiest thing, right? It was subtle, but the designer did a good job of guiding the player to it and highlighting that object. But what this was you're able to collect clues throughout the level, find different pieces of information and different collectibles, and then come to this microscope and actually interact with them and actually take a closer look at them and get more information that helped them progress even further. And why this was a really cool and interesting featured asset was when the player walked up to it, this was back when we were using a first-person system, it would actually change from this first-person perspective and view into like you're looking through a microscope. So there's a small little subtle interaction that the player was actually looking into it. So really, really nice. And so those are the three things you want to be focusing on for the featured asset are you want it to be interactive, so not just some item that the player picks up and then you're done with. You know, like my featured asset is a fuse, and the player picks it up and now they can power on a generator. No, you want to push yourself further than that. So something that's interactive, again, something memorable to the player's experience, as well as tied to player progression is always a good thing because you don't want the player to be missing it. So this could be a system. This could be some type of interaction or something that helps with progression. Another good one I've seen was the student had some type of like a headset that the player first found, and then they could use it to find collectibles. So when you were near a collectible and you put your little headset on, I think you press it, you put it on like M on or something on the keyboard, it would send out this like ping and you could see any collectible that was near you. So it was helpful and it was pretty good, really well implemented. So you can think about it in terms of a system, right, and different ways it can interact with your level or the inventory, or some type of system that you're going to be building. So any questions at all about those top two, the player goal and the featured asset? No? Okay, so the more information you put here, the better. Don't just give me one short little sentence of the player goes and finds this object, or the player goes and finds, you know, the apple or the medicine or something like that. Give it more impact, more of, you know, why is the player here? Who sent them? How are they going to accomplish it? The more detailed you put here, the better it's going to be for you. And being able to communicate as a designer is a skill that's is very well overlooked. Working with a team is one, but being able to communicate your ideas is another. So being able to stand up here to a room of people or to a room of your other fellow level designers and pitch your ideas or pitch your level to where everyone can visualize in their head what you're seeing is something that takes practice and definitely a valuable skill to have. So the next section are the major mechanics. The two mechanics you're going to be building and implementing. So again, these can come from the creative vision or something inspired from these. So yeah, these acceptable mechanics you can start to pick from these or choose some of your own and include those in this section here. So in these brackets right there, you want to actually tell me what the mechanic is that you're going to be using. What is the player's action? What am I going to be doing with this mechanic, right? Now down here, if you want to also be including in here anything technically, if describing how you're going to actually build this in Unity, it won't hurt. That's totally fine with me as well. Now and down here, the IPM, you'll see these are A, B, C, and on the side here we have IPM. So here you're going to describe the mechanic. Here, down in these three examples, you're going to describe three different setups. So three different times in the level the player is going to be experiencing this. So don't write one setup and this is step one, this is step two, this is step three. Think about, okay, if I want to have exploding barrels in my level, and exploding barrels can interact with destructible walls. That's my mechanic, right? So introduce. Maybe there's right near the beginning of the level, there's a small hole and a barrel next to it. Very simply, the player can pick it up and throw it and break the wall, right? Introduce them to it. Very simple, straightforward setup. The second one, you get to a larger warehouse and there's a weak wall, but you don't have access to the barrels right away, right? They're up on a catwalk, so the player needs to complete some other small minor setup to actually get to the barrels. Now with the barrels, you can explode, use those to go forward. Another way I could think about it would be you have barrels on a cart, some type of cart or something, and the cart you can slide with the grab knob back and forth, right? So then you have to unblock the path for this cart, move this cart in front of a weak structure or something, and now throw another barrel at it, and it hits an I-beam down and falls, and now you have a pathway up, right? Same mechanic. We're using the same system because you'll be surprised. Getting a barrel to actually explode on collision To actually cause damage, that part's not as hard because we have a damage script for you, but having it actually look good, all that combined actually takes time and effort. There's no just go to the asset store and download Exploding Barrel. I mean, that's possible, but don't do that, right? Really take the time to learn how to do that and set it up yourself. And if it doesn't look that great, you've got time to work that, and there's other things that we can do to help you out to push yourself and get the best and just get your vision across. But so in here, the top section, what that mechanic is specifically. Down here, what are the examples, the different ways you're going to do it. Another common mistake we see all the time is you'll have your 5 different setups, and I've seen it. I saw it last month. I'm sure I'll see it this month, and moving forward, coming forward all the time, is you'll have, in this room there's laser wires. In the next room there's pressure plates, and then in the next room there's like arrow traps. And there's no reusage of these mechanics. And you'll see a lot in games where you build one system and now it's, okay, how much mileage can I get out of this? How many different ways can I have this same interaction or this same system to make it fun and different every time? And that's what you want to be doing. And that's why here we only have 2 mechanics. You don't want to be coming up with 4 or 5. Just focus on 2. You have these 2 mechanics you're designing. You have platforming with jumping and crouching, as well as the grav null. With all those, that's about 4 good mechanics. You can make an interesting and enjoyable level that has a lot of variety in it. So moving on to the minor setups down here, there's 15 of them, so I'm scrolling down to here. So what these are referring back to some of those low scope, small setups. And to think about these in terms of time, we like to focus, I like to say about 8 to 12 seconds of actual interaction time. So an average about 10 seconds to complete one of these. So this could be anything, again, from moving boxes or moving some items, sliding items, using the grav null, other minor ways, collecting little hidden goodies, anything that the player is actually doing. And you'll see if you look forward into the map requirements that you need to have 15 collectibles on your map. Well, if you take a look at the setups down here, you'll notice that there's 15 of them. Tied in with your major setups and your player goal, you can describe in here your collectibles that the player is going to be obtaining. But don't just have your collectibles in your level, right? So we want to be always using the collectibles as rewards for the player. And this could be anything as simple as just going to where we want them to go to, right? So the 3 different ways you can use collectibles, one of them could be as a breadcrumb, right? So I'm not talking about a physical piece of bread on the ground the player collects. I'm talking about there's an item over there, or there's an item way up on a ledge. I don't know how to get to it, but I know I can go there somehow, right? Because I see that item up there. It means I know I can get there some way. So that's one way to use them. Another one is as a hidden object, right, or as some type of extra thing the player's doing. But again, you don't want it just to be hidden on the desk that I just pick it up. You want there to be some interaction. Maybe I just pull the drawer out, right, and get the collectible. That's interacting in some way. And then tied to player progression is another. So you need to collect 4 pieces of the code to unlock the safe, things like that. Again, very generic. That was the first thing that comes to mind because I see that all the time. A generator, if you think I want to make a sweet generator for my featured asset. Okay, I think it's possible. I'm sure you can do it. But I've turned on a lot of generators in the last 2 years of teaching this course. It seems to be the very common thing that you go to. So try and set yourself apart and make it unique. A lot of it is just changing the name of it, changing the look of it and what you're actually doing, the interactions that the player's experiencing. It'll really make a difference and go a long way. And if you're having trouble coming up with ideas or coming up with suggestions, the best thing you can do is play some of the example levels. So I'll just give you a sneak peek, which is in the content folder. This is for the ILA assignment number 3. But if you think that you're having a tough time, these 2 examples right here. This Team Kale one, this is the 3rd person. This is a more recent from an on-campus team. This example gold here, this is a little older, and both of them are using turrets. We used to have turrets, and we no longer are supporting them in our project. So don't get confused with that. But this example goal, this was done in 1 month. This was a team of 4 people online that made a map in 1 week as a team. Then they had a 1 week to do an alpha and a beta. Beta was another week. And then the gold was the final week, so week 4. And it was an intense schedule, and we had that class, but what we decided to do was to split this up across multiple classes. Now you have a whole month to learn how to actually use Unity and Perforce. Oh yeah, during that whole month they were learning Perforce for the first time as a team. So yeah, that was, looking back, that was an intense month of Full Sail. So what we've done now is you learn it now, you build a map individually, you go into level design, you build it functionally as individuals, and then you come together as a team in a whole month and polish it up. So that's what this one is. But still, you can play this and see a lot of really good effort, and should really inspire you to push yourselves and to do as best as as best as you can, and even better than what they've submitted. So any questions at all about the LDD or any of the parts? No? If I'm ever giving you guys information overload, totally just stop me, because we can take a break at any point. When you get quiet like this, you scare me. What's up?
I just want to make sure, right now we're just basically writing out the details, but we're not actually implementing.
No, this whole class. So you'll see in the assignments in the course, we're just preparing the design. And you can ask Jacob in the back. Jacob, in level design, and so far you're still early in Des 3, but in level design, how much design were you actually doing in a percentage?
A good amount.
A good amount, you say? Okay. So I've heard a lot. I heard that amount was low coming from Des 3 students, like 10 to 15%. The majority of the time you're implementing. Yeah. You think that was the case? You're implementing a lot of what you've designed? And that's the plan going forward, is you design what you want now, get a feel for it, and then in level design you actually start to build that and implement it. And then in moving forward into Des 3, you implement that as a team. So there is some design, and you probably will run into some issues like, oh man, I realize this is way too, I can't make a grappling hook and a swinging from platform to platform. Maybe I need to adjust my design and change it to make something more feasible. And then as a team, you'll come together, and this is a really cool part of the process, and you guys get to see it. So try and pay attention to it and get into this blended learning, because this is definitely, these classes together do really benefit from each other. Is you start to now design, okay, you have pressure plates in my level, I have sliding mine carts in mine. How can we put those together and make a cool interaction, right? What can you do in your level that I can allow the player to master in mine, right? So you can start to build and now you can layer in that story and kind of put the levels together from that sense. So there is some design that goes into it, but this is the design heavy course. So like the project setup and visuals that you guys are working on now, obviously that is to get you guys familiar with setting up your Perforce project and familiar with using Perforce, as well as paying attention to reference images. Because on your map, you're going to need reference images. When you build your levels, you actually want to be looking at your references to get proper scale, get a sense of structure. Like sometimes you'll be building a level without any reference and things will just slightly be off. But it might be that your windows are like, a foot too high, or your door is just 2 feet too wide. And if you use reference, you'll get all those proportions, and everything will come together like you see it in modern life. So Scraps is set to be a more modern, realistic game, quote unquote. That doesn't mean that it needs to be perfect and pristine like the real world, because the real world is actually pretty boring, where everything is very structured. Like look at the desks, everything is perfectly lined up with seats evenly spaced out from each other. In a game, or in like the post-apocalyptic sense, everything would be turned over or rotated, moved, looked like it was used as a barricade, dirtier, things like that. So you really want to be able to analyze reference moving forward. And then obviously these are the creative something where you start to design. The perforce test, obviously just testing your knowledge, and then the map rough, you turn in your first revision of the map. Here we learned some of the technical stuff inside of Unity, learning animations, learning the animator, trigger volumes. So you'll be using that information to build your level in Scraps and Level Design. And then here you turn in your final map, and then as well as the rigid bodies. Those are basically learning about the physics and the constraints and how you can use those with the Gravenol and give you more insight to how you can push your setups even further using physics. So it's a mixture of creative and technical, all while you're designing through the creative assignments. So it looks like we're doing pretty good on time. So let's go ahead and take a short break. I'll give you guys 15 minutes. So at 10:20, I'm going to play the John Cleese video. So that's the video for the ILA assignment for today. So after the video, all you guys have to do is just the discussion about it. Sound good? All right. So yeah, it's 10:05 right now. Come back. Take a 15-minute break. I'm going to start the video right at 10:20 so we have time to finish it before 11. All right?